We are live. I'd like to welcome everyone to another episode of Heart to Heart with Bree. Tonight's guest is Pastor W. Pryce. Would you please introduce yourself to the viewers?
Hello, everyone. So, my name is Webster Price, and I'm fairly new to pastoring. And the church that I pastor is Grace Life Apostolic Tabernacle. We are a Pentecostal church. Um, I've known Bree for a couple of years now. We are a distant family.
Yes.
So, we've been connected on Facebook for several years. So, I get to see her life, and she gets to see my life. So we've been doing good so far. So it's a privilege to be on here. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Webster is a young man that I've admired over the years. We're both connected to Ginger House, and I tell you, I can't say anything. I I mean, I was just saying to Webster, I remember when you were single and it's like you're married and children and all of that. But I'm very proud of Webster, and I am definitely looking forward to this conversation. And I have to tell you, Webster, before I reached out to you to ask you to be on the podcast, you were someone that I was thinking about for a long time. But there are people that I reach out to and they don't respond, which is fine because there are some who they reach out months later. So nothing happens before it's time. So once again, thank you so much, Webster.
Thank you.
So tonight's topic is the dynamics of family life. And I think this is something that we really don't give much thought to until it's too late. So I would like to ask you, Webster, would you agree that each member of the family has a distinctive role?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Family dynamics influence everything from how we see
Yes,
ourselves to how we build relationships with others. Whether you grew up in a traditional household or a blended family, right? So we talk about the nuclear families that
yes,
consist of two parents and their children. And this traditional
yes,
structure typically emphasizes direct parent-child relationships. In other words, parents play the central role in raising children, right, and running the
yes.
household and being responsible for example, finances rather than relying on extended family. So within this framework, the nuclear family of a husband, wife, children is seen as a core structure for carrying out God's words and His purpose.
Yes, yes, I love your answer. I'd like to welcome Mikey Go. Thank you for tuning in, Mikey. Why is it important to have an understanding of our role in the family dynamic?
That's a good question, and I believe that's for I would say for fostering healthier relationships,
Yes,
as it clarifies expectation and it promotes effective communication and support within the family system. Um, Family members rely on each other for emotional, physical, and economic support, right? And
yes,
they are one of the primary sources of relationship security or stress, so to speak. So, and we're living in a time where that family dynamic, it's shaken up, right? And just when
yes,
we look in the world today, we're seeing a different picture, right? So,
yes,
for many of us, family is one of the most important aspects of our lives, and whether biological or chosen, it's our family members that we rely on for support. But like all relationships, there are dynamics at play. And
I
if I may,
definitely agree with that.
yeah, absolutely. And if I had just had one more thing, Bridget,
Sure.
the Bible presents family dynamics as a vital component of God's
Yes.
design for humanity, right? So serving as a foundational for society stability, spiritual growth, and the transmission of faith across generations.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up. I'd like to welcome my cousin Lennon. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let's talk about the role of parents. I honestly didn't think about parenthood because I did not intend in my younger years to have children. It was something that just happened. And I really think we do ourselves a disservice when we don't really think about parenthood, whether it's something we envision in our lives or not, because it's something that is so important, so important. There are so many lives that are ruined because of poor parenting.
Mhm.
People who did not put thought into becoming a parent. Yeah,
Mhm.
you can go out there and sleep with a million and one women and think you're the man, but are you the man if you're not there to support them?
Absolutely.
Does it make you a woman? Just because we can bear children doesn't make us a woman, if you understand what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Being a parent is a gift from God, but it's also a serious responsibility that we have to, take into account. So, what's your take? Let's talk about the role of parents, co-parenting and leading by example.
Right. And so I grew up, and I've always pondered back on my childhood. I grew up with my mom and my dad in the home. So they've always been present. And looking back, it was such a it's a blessing.
Yes,
And in my current state, I find myself sometimes reaching back to how my dad will react to something in the home. And it's amazing how much of the characteristics and how much of the things that have happened in the home as a child that I've taken with me, and I think I'm still, the for lack of a better word, I can't find the word to explain, but I how the man that I am today is a lot of what happened back then, mold me into who I am today. So I'm
yes,
always assessing and reassessing how I can better co-parent with my wife. And over the years, there has been a lot of readjustment, right?
yes,
There's constantly looking to see how I can better out, how I can improve, right? So, expounding on how routine, um, your how you had to, how routine. I'm a very routine person. Let me back up. I'm very routine, and I like to do things
yes,
a certain way. And so I have to always back up and say, okay, assessing what am I doing, and how can I be better. So when both parents consistently, put their children needs first, they can
yes.
can have a healthy and effective co-parenting, and partnership. And I've seen that with my own parents growing up, where that they partner together in raising six children. So it's very critically very important, that we have that line of communication as well and how to co-parent.
I definitely agree with that, Webster. I'd like to welcome Andrew and Non Perfect. Thank you both for tuning in. I have to ask you this question, Webster. Do
Mhm.
you think that, like before marriage, there's usually premarital counseling? Do you
Mhm.
think that there should be a parenting class for future reference, just in case it's needed? Because, when I got married, I just thought about getting married. I didn't really think about what life would be like. A lot of women, and I'm not stereotyping, but we get caught up in this fantasy of this lovely wedding, and we don't think about the aftermath. But it's really hard to be a good parent and you're not with the right individual, or you're both in conflict all the time. And then you add the stress of everyday life, so I mean, what's your take on that? Should the church really take a role in, because I think it's like protection for the future, or at least equipping the married individuals with information that they may need eventually.
Yeah, I think that's a very important question that you asked, Bridget. And um, before marriage, again, as I was saying to you, and as you know, I travel the world, and
Yes,
I go whenever I think like every 6 months I would go
I
somewhere.
remember that. I remember.
And
I would
so
always enjoy your pictures.
now getting married, you know, it's not like that anymore because I have
Right.
responsibilities. And so I don't believe there are any manuals out there in how you can navigate children. Was that your question? How to navigate children
Well,
uh,
to
to
be
be
prepared
prepared?
for the role, because I think that many of us, when we get married, and I'm not saying everyone, but there's a level of immaturity that is still there. And we both, both people may still have some growing to do. And when you add the conflicts of life, you add the stress of everyday life, and then you add children to the mix. You
Right.
know, do we take the time to put our personal feelings aside to think of the good, look at the bigger picture, look at the big picture of the family,
Mm-hmm.
instead of, what, like you said, you used to travel the world, you
Mm-hmm.
know could you see yourself telling your wife, well, later for you, but I'm taking this trip? I mean, you get what I'm saying? So
Yeah, yeah.
there are some things we have to put aside. There are
Right.
some things that we have to change. We have to adapt
Right.
to our new life.
Right. And just like you said, sometimes we think about the beautiful wedding, right, and the honeymoon. But
Yes.
and sometimes we have these preconceived ideas that when I get into marriage, then I'll have a children, and we see on social media the beautiful picture of a family, and
Yes.
we want that, and that's good. But you also don't see the babies being fussy. You don't see
Yes.
you have to cancel your morning routine of going to the gym and have to go later on. You don't see you can't hang out with your boys or you can hang out with the girls in the way or the time frame that you would like to. So there's a big adjustment that, and I believe that we should put it out there more. Say, hey, okay, you get married, and when you bring children in the mix of that, it changes the dynamics, right? And if you have problems and you would focus on each other and address those problems when kids come into the picture, the mindset shift now to the children, right? And so
Yes.
um, if you and your spouse have issues, it's now going to be amplified, right?
Definitely.
And so it's very important. And I think it should be talked about more into how we can navigate children, coming into marriage and then having children and the whole dynamic of it. There's a lot of intricacies that I believe, that we don't really talk about it. And social media really doesn't do a good job in, helping to show those, highlight those areas, if that makes sense.
I mean, that is so true. Where does God place in this dynamic?
Um, God is placed as the head of the household and the ultimate
Yes.
source of authority and guidance in every family member, right? I believe Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. Uh, Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. It's one thing to believe in God. It's a
Yes.
completely different ball of wax to make his preeminent in all things in your life, right? All of one's heart, soul, and strength should be committed to loving God and making him the rank above anything else in our lives. And as you mentioned, and it can be difficult because we have the stresses of life. We have traumas that we're dealing with, right? And sometimes we rely on our feelings and the word of God, right? And so it takes discipline as well to say, you know what, I'm going to rely on God's promise. What is God saying? So
Yes. I mean, I definitely agree with you on that. I think if we don't put God first, then we're setting ourselves up for a
absolutely.
fall. And I think if we truly put God first, we will turn to Him during times of
Right.
conflict. I think it will help us to really put everything in perspective and not feel so overwhelmed. But God should definitely be the head of the family. So I definitely agree with you on that. Now let's talk about conflict resolution and
Mm-hmm.
differences. You know, when no matter how much, when we fall in love, we don't think about falling out. We don't think about when that first quarrel takes place. We're in shock because we didn't think that would happen. But in life, there will be conflict. In life, we will not always get along. There will be differences. So how are we to handle these situations? Because remember, we're setting an example for our
Mm-hmm.
children. So, how do we handle conflict, and how do we, deal with
Right.
differences?
And so as humans, we are going to have conflicts and we're going to have differences, right? it's inevitable in any family. And the way we handle these conflicts can either strengthen or weaken our relationships. And so, understanding the different conflict styles within your family is crucial to resolving disputes effectively, right? When I think about
Yes.
conflict, the root cause, conflicts can stem from whether it's differences in values, beliefs, lifestyles, communication styles, parenting approaches, financial stress, or unresolved emotional issues. And I believe that coming clean and honest at the table of the differences you have and trying to build that bridge is very crucial. And so, again, I believe having an open communication is absolute critical in addressing, the conflicts and finding a resolution. And, of course, we rely on God for strength and for wisdom, but also there's resources out there, right? Um, that you can
Yes.
find a lot of resources, therapy, and all that in helping to resolve it. We're living in an informational age, and so we definitely utilize
Yes.
that.
Yes. I like how you said that. Now, I grew up in a home where my father was an alcoholic, and that is what destroyed our family. I grew up during a time when you didn't hear the word domestic
Right,
abuse, but that is something that I witnessed growing up. And as a child, it was a very traumatic experience. And I often wonder, I've never asked my mother these questions, but did she see any sign of this before she married my dad? Would that have stopped her from marrying him? I don't think so, to be honest. But what I saw in my father, I just don't think he understood how to resolve a conflict, and I think, look, I can't speak for all alcoholics. I've never had that issue, but they say that alcohol is a true serum, you know? So I often wondered, were, those, the hostile behavior, all of that, was that something that was just, did he have some resentment about the responsibilities that he was
right,
carrying? And I look back, he was a young father. I mean, because when I'm the first child, he was in his early 20s. I had my first child at the age of 26, and it was overwhelming, but fortunately I had my mother there to support me. So I mean, what's your take on that? I think that if you have issues as far as whether you're a man or woman and you have a problem with being with one partner, or if there's a substance abuse problem, if you have a problem with alcohol, if your behavior does not fit in with marriage, should you get married or should you wait? Maybe you'll break a person's heart. But at the end of the day, if you know in your heart that you're not ready for marriage or you can bear the responsibility of, because as you know, it is a big responsibility. But do you want to, especially if we have experienced these things in our younger years, to inflict that on the next generation, if that makes sense?
yeah. Again, it requires honesty and open
Yes.
communication, right? Respect, treating each other with kindness, patience, and understanding, especially during times of disagreement or need. And truly listening to understand another person's point of view rather than just waiting to respond, right? And I can't stress it enough again, that open communication and just listening, and if you're at a point where you need help, whether struggling with alcoholism, and I don't know how that is because I never had, I didn't grow up in a household where anyone had that type of struggle. And so, from
Right.
looking from the outside, I've heard stories of God redemptive power in rescuing a husband or a wife that struggle with alcoholism. And so, coming to God honestly, and if you have a partner, or if you're a husband that's leading a family and you have that struggle, it's gonna hurt your family, and you've got to get to
Yes.
that point or to that grip or an understanding that, listen, I need to change, or I'm gonna have to live with the destruction and the chaos that this will cause my family. And again, the beautiful thing about it is that God's redemptive power is always available, but it takes us coming to
Yes.
that place. It takes honesty and transparency, and coming as a child saying, you know what, God, I need some help here, but in a family dynamic, it takes you and that spouse working together. And again, it can be a very challenging task. And I also believe, getting a therapist, involved, or finding therapy to help you cope and to help you to get to that place that you need to get. I'm not sure if I answered the question fully, Bridget.
No, but yes, you did. Yes, you did. And what I would like to say to a parent out there that may be struggling with this issue, because it's not always the father that's an alcoholic or, addicted to some form of
Mm-hmm.
substance. But, trauma is real, and no parent sets out to hurt their children. But if a child grows up in a home with that sort of chaos, I promise you that there is a lot of damage that's taken place in that child's life. So if you are on that road, I mean, get some
Absolutely.
help, because I'm telling you, there's nothing worse than always waiting for that next episode. It's not very
Absolutely.
pleasant. So for our children, let's really take these things into serious consideration. Pray and get help. I mean, definitely. So now let's talk about respect, Webster. What's your take on respect in the
Yeah,
family?
so respect, it benefits the family dynamic by creating a stronger bond and more effective to when you have that stronger bond, right? You're more effective to tackle conflict, and also when you show respect to one another, it creates a positive environment where each person of the family can feel safe to express themselves. And so if you're in the home relationship and there's no respect, there's bound to be a lot of toxicity, right? The relationship is bound to break down because the other person doesn't feel valued,
Yes.
right? And so sometimes I know, we come from different background where, you know, um, whether someone talks at a certain tone and, that person is not used to that, that can sometimes come off as a form of disrespect. So there's a lot of nuances to it as well. But I believe, again, I keep going back to this word, open communication, talk about it.
Yes.
But respect is vital in nourishing and having a healthy relationship.
Yes, yes. And I think, respect is
Mhm.
huge. Children need to feel respected. The husband wants to feel respected. The wife wants to feel respected. But I will say this, and I'm speaking from a woman's perspective. And if anyone that's viewing would like to chime in, please do. But I can tell you, Webster, that as a woman, when a woman does not respect her man, she is not going to love him. And it will
Right,
show. you know, what child wants to live in an environment
right.
like that? Like you said, it's
Hmm.
toxic. The children pick up on that kind of energy. And, you know, the example is being set for the next generation to continue with that cycle. I like how you keep going back to open communication. It is so important to sit down with your spouse. Hey, what's going on? I notice you don't smile
Hmm.
anymore. I notice you don't talk to me anymore. You don't want me to touch you. You don't want me to hug you. You don't want me to kiss you. What's going on? Have that honest conversation, and be willing. You may not like what you hear, but you have to listen and take it, because that's the only way to resolve these issues. I mean, would you agree with me on that point,
Absolutely, it takes
Webster?
some level of discomfort, right? You're not always right in your approach, and you have to own up to that. And so your spouse is sometimes the mirror that's staring right back at you of behavior.
Yes.
And sometimes if you love your wife, you love your husband, you will sit and you will listen to them and take that constructive criticism. And it doesn't always feel right, right? But on the
Right.
other side, whether it's that wife or that husband that's giving the constructive criticism, it's important that you watch your tone as well. You do it in a loving
Yes.
way. So, having the hard conversation is very important. I know my wife and I we do a Tuesday morning check in. I know we haven't been really consistent on it, and we talk about what's going on in our home. You know, how can we be better? You know, where are we lacking, and how can we strategize, and how can we do better? So having a time where you just clear your calendar, right? Just it's just
Yes.
you and your spouse, and you lock in and you have those conversations, whether it's hard, soft, have that conversation, and just be mindful of the relationship, you know, and not neglecting it.
Yes.
And we can get so busy where we neglect our relationship, and we neglect our wife or husband, and then we wake up 2, 3 years later, and there's a stranger in the house. If you're not
Yes.
nourishing it, if you're not mindful, then you know that will happen if you're neglecting the relationship. But if you're nourishing it and you're taking care of it, then you know you'll grow together in grace. Not
And I love that idea. I love what you and your wife are doing. I think a date night is important to a marriage. You may not even leave the house when your children go to
right.
bed. Set that time aside to do something special together. But what you and your wife are doing is a great idea. And I hope other couples will think about something
Hmm.
like that. Now, let's talk about families struggling with dysfunction. You know, if a person is watching this episode and they can see them that they can see themselves in what we're talking about, you know, what is a way for them to, I'm ready to change, but how can they go about changing?
Um, Families struggling with dysfunction. God can heal families with dysfunction and toxicity, right? And seek to restore peace in relationships, striving to live at peace with everyone as much as possible. Right? So the scripture says. And so we have to trust in God's redemptive power, as I mentioned before, believe in God's ability to work through difficult situations and for good, casting our anxieties on Him because He cares, right? And so a therapy, seeking professional help, you know, particularly family therapy, can help address
Yes.
unhealthy patterns and provide new, you know, coping skills. Again, you have all kind of dysfunction and struggling, right? Financial hardship, job instability, and chronic illnesses, and that can strain a family, right? Past trauma, and so it's very important. Again, communication, and if you need to seek professional help, absolutely seek that professional help, and just come to the table and be honest.
Yes. Now, what would you say to the fact that you have to, first of all, acknowledge where the dysfunction may lie? Because some people, like you may go to the spouse and say, honey, I just think you drink a little too much. And they're like making excuses, or honey, I don't like how you talk to
Hmm.
me. And, but you're not accepting the responsibility for it. I think that if we cannot admit or, you know, have an honest perception of where we really are within ourselves, then how can we change what we do not
Yeah,
acknowledge?
and I think that again, finding a safe space, creating that safe space,
Yes.
and looking one another in the eye and talk about it. And so, if you have a loved one and they are not allowing you to create that safe space to address something that is affecting the union, the family, then there's a bigger problem there. And that I would say
Yes.
either seek professional help or maybe get pastoral help involved, but you should be able as a family, as a couple, to create that safe space and tackle
Yes.
the elephant in the room.
Definitely. Definitely. As you said, it goes back to
Hmm.
communication. Communication is key. Let's talk about intentional parenting. Hindsight is always
Hmm.
2020. My children are now in their 30s, and I can look back and see the mistakes that I made. I can honestly see them and acknowledge them. And I've spoken to my kids about it. I used to yell a
Hmm.
lot. I used to do a lot of yelling, And yelling does
No.
not work because after a while they become immune to it.
Hmm.
It's like they don't even hear it anymore. But as they've gotten older, whether I agree with them or not, I am learning that I have to respect them as adults because the dynamic does change. Our roles change as everyone grows up. But it's like getting to that point where you can acknowledge your failures or acknowledge where you've made the mistakes and say, you know what, it's time to change things because I want my children to be good parents. And I want them to understand that they are worthy of an apology. There are some people who are drinking and they're doing drugs because they never got that apology from a parent or a grandparent, whoever. They hold themselves to the past. And I think that when you're young, if you can get it right from the beginning, you will save your family a lot of
Absolutely.
heartache. But let's address intentional
Yeah,
parenting.
if you're blessed with the gift of children, God has given you the most incredible opportunity and responsible
Yes,
and responsibility to help your child know, love, and follow Jesus, right? And so I think
yes,
about what you said. I think about deliberate presence, right? As a parent, making a conscious effort to be present and engaged is a must, right? Setting aside
yes,
distraction like phones, and God is still working on me, right? Because sometimes we get so busy,
yes,
and there are moments when my daughter's talking to me, and I'm zoning my phone. And sometimes when I think of look back, I say this is not good. And so it takes a lot of
yes,
intentionality to really come to that honest, point, and do some introspection and say, okay, I need to be present, right? And I know I spoke to my wife many times, say, you know what, we need to be more present, right? So I think having that intentionality of wanting to connect with your child and enjoy activities with your child is very important. Children are going to
yes.
do um, what they see, not what they are told, right? Me
That's
back to
true.
which brings me to my next point, right? Model the behavior you want to see. And so
Yes,
intentional parenting is to understand they are um, uh, constant role models, right? To make a deliberate choice to live out the values they want to still instill in their children. So again, model the behavior that you want to see. Your children are going to say the
yes.
things that you say, and they're going to do the things that they see you do. They're always watching. Sometimes when I look at my kids, they're always
True.
side eyeing me.
Yeah,
Sometimes they are playing and playing
true.
with their toys, and they have one eye on their toy and another eye on you. So you got to be so careful. And I know my wife keeps me in line with this. Say, watch what you say, watch what you do, because they're always watching. And so,
They you, kids do pay attention, and I can tell you that my father, when I was growing up, every single day he got a
hmm
newspaper. He read the newspaper every day. And when I grew up, I would do the same thing. And I remember my ex-husband asked me, like, why do you always read the newspaper every day? He said, I've never known anyone that reads the newspaper every day. And when we went to England and he met my dad, every time he saw my dad every day, and he said, now I get it. That was just one of those habits I picked up from my dad. He was a reader, and I tell you, he taught me how to read. I was reading from a very young age. And so that's a very fond memory to me. So, like you said, kids are watching you. I don't think he ever stopped to think, oh, my daughter's going to read the newspaper. And I really did that because it was something my dad did, and I thought it was something
hmm
positive. Kids pay attention to the things we do and the things we
they do.
say.
They are.
Yeah. Sometimes people being shocked that their kids are
hmm
cursing, but it's like, where did
With
they hear it?
right, right. Yeah, the behavior and the attitudes and the things that they say, it's a reflection of the home that they are in, or they were raised in.
Yeah, it's the truth. It's the truth. Let's talk about how to avoid choosing the wrong
hmm
partner. I think having the right
Bridget, I think. Just give me a moment. Give us a moment. Her computer went down. She's rebooting. Give us a few more moments. Bridget is heading back.
Okay. I please accept my apologies. My computer just went out on me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. So thank you for waiting, Webster, and thank you for the viewers who are still there.
That's okay. That could happen.
Okay. Okay, so we're back. We're back. So we were about to talk about how to avoid choosing the wrong partner. I think that we have to put more thought into our life partners. We
Hmm.
have to really give it thought. Is this a good person? Even if it's a person you don't plan to have children with, but to live life the way God intended us to live. So Webster, what is your take on that, on choosing the right partner?
Yeah, good question. I believe to pray for God's guidance, right? And seek counsel from wise believers and prioritize spiritual compatibility, right? And ensuring your potential partner shares your faith in God and get to know yourself, your desires, and what you truly need in a relationship. I remember when I was seeking a wife and praying for a wife, I earnestly prayed, right? And I wasn't in a hurry. And even though, you've got people my age, they were getting married, they were having children. And at one point, I said to myself, well, maybe God forgotten about me, right? I feel like I'm behind, and God is maybe not moving or showing me my who my wife is fast enough, right? And so that's where frustration kicks in, and when that happens, we have to be careful. We have to be careful that the devil doesn't send the wrong person our way, right? We have to
Yes.
patient, patiently wait, get to know ourselves, and we won't have it all together, right? And so it's important also not to be become romantically involved with someone who does not follow Christ. This
Yes.
can compromise spiritual integrity and lead to negative outcomes, according to 2 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 14. So seek wise counsel. Wait on the Lord, and really think about yourself, and where you are, right? Because you don't want to go into this thing being immature, right?
Yes.
I'm not saying you're going to be perfect. You can grow together, right? But sometimes, we go into this thing, and the person is totally different, and from what who we think, from so we think we're marrying this person, and we get into the relationship, a totally different person.
True.
So, and again, things can work out and you can grow together, but you have to be careful, seek counsel, seek the Lord counsel, be discerning.
Yes. And you said marry your morals and not your preferences. I'd
Right.
like to thank my mom for tuning in. And you know
Right.
what? Like I said, just to, and I think we should be able to have these conversations with our children.
Right.
I remember when before my daughter got married, I told her, I don't want you to get married because I didn't know the young man. She did it anyway. He turned out to be a good guy. But that's not always the case. I think we really have to put careful thought into choosing a partner. Let's talk about nurturing and disciplining our children. Now, when I was growing up, my mom was the nurturer and my dad was a disciplinarian, and I associated that with, I mean, being a disciplinarian, I associated that with my dad,
Hmm.
and I think we should be able to associate both. I think both parents should play a role in nurturing as well as disciplining. I mean, what's your take on that?
So I don't do a good job disciplining my daughter. I look at her and like, that's my little girl. I can't, even though sometimes she just drives me up the wall, it's hard for me to put my hands on her. I may raise my voice here and there, and looking back, I, I've never seen my dad lay his hands on my sister. It
Oh,
was
wow.
it was
Wow.
working my mom that did the discipline with my sister. I never seen my dad do that, so I don't know if that may have an effect
Yeah,
on
I
me.
think that may play a role. Now, something I've come to learn is that because when I was growing up, it was the belt. We don't have to discipline our children like that anymore. As my children got older, because I started off with the spanking, but then
Hmm.
as they got older, like with my late son, if you took away his video game for a week or two,
Hmm.
that would bring him back to reality really fast. So I had to learn to be creative. And I'm not telling you I didn't spank, but
Yeah.
because sometimes it's like, okay, if my words are not getting through to you, then I'm just going to have to do what I have to do. But I feel that children need to know that they are loved and to, feel that nurturing coming from both parents and not just one, because it's easy for one parent to be the bad guy, one parent to be the good guy. Kids will use that. I've come to see that kids are smart and they will use that. I
Yeah.
wish my father had shown a little more nurturing. Yeah, he had his faults and everything, and I know that in his own way he loved us. But what we saw from him was a strict, disciplinarian. I mean, we were very afraid of our dad. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a child should be afraid of their parent. I think we should be afraid of the consequences of our actions when we've done the wrong thing, but not be afraid of our parent. A therapist helped me to understand. He said to me that sometimes we see God the way we see our earthly father.
Mm-hmm.
And when he said that to me, it made sense because I didn't see God as this loving, kind, nurturing God until later in life.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that God couldn't wait to see you slip up and then he would get you. That was my mentality growing up. And God is not like that. So I think that after he said that to me, I did associate that with my father because I believe my dad loved me? Like I said earlier, yes. But when he disciplined us, it didn't feel that way. I mean, what's your take on that?
Again, I'll go back to modeling the type of behavior you want your children to follow,
Yes.
and creating a space where your child feels comfortable expressing their thoughts, feelings, and listening actively to their concerns. And also spending time with your children is important, and involve your child in tasks, whether it's cooking and cleaning, right?
Yes.
And I know for me, I tend to sometimes, if I'm in the kitchen, I just want to go in there, get things done, and leave. And so
Yes.
when involving the child, you take your time, right? And you show them and so forth. And I'm not completely there yet, but I'm learning, and I see my wife doing that where she gets our daughter involved. Whether she's frying dumplings, she'll give her a little flour to make on her own. And so those little things, help the child to grow up and into wanting to do things with you and wanting to share things with you, right? And so I know I enjoyed hearing my wife's story of how, they're open to each other growing up in her family. They don't keep any secret, whether to her family, that they're very open and they share because that's how they were
Yes.
taught. And so, to bring my point, so when you train a child up like that to be open, then they won't be hiding things, right? I think it's a natural inclination for human, to kind of hide things because we have sin in our flesh.
Yes.
I believe when you foster that type of environment where your child can be transparent and having that safe space to express their feelings and what happened, I think that's a win-win when they, reach that adult stage. And I know
Yes.
you were asking a question on your father. If you don't mind repeating
Yeah,
that,
go ahead.
I kind of went off. So if you could ask that question again.
Which one was that? I'm sorry.
You were talking about your father and the disciplinary, and maybe
Oh yeah,
answer.
the disciplinarian. So yeah, no, but I'm glad you saying that it made me think back to my daughter. She would always ask me, well, my kids, all of them, Mom, can we help you fold laundry? And
Mhm,
it would be like, it's just gonna, I can fold this laundry up in no time if they fold it because I like things folded a certain way, done
mhm,
a certain way. And I robbed them of the experience. I robbed myself of the experience.
wow,
Looking back, I wish I'd let them do some of the things because it would have taught them, and it would have given us the opportunity to bond and connect for sure. But yeah, the question earlier, it was just like with my father, like seeing him as a disciplinarian and not a nurturer. Now, looking back, there were times like when we weren't feeling well, he would
mhm,
always have a bottle of bay rum. I cannot stand the smell of bay rum, but I remember he would pour that in his hands and he
mhm,
would hold it over our face and rub it on our chest. And I look back and I say, okay, that was a nurturing action. That was nurturing and that was him showing love in his own way. you know he grew up during a different time, but I wish I had seen a little bit more of that. You talking about not wanting to discipline your daughter, I'm seeing where fathers are now changing. They are becoming nurturers, something that fathers during my time did not display. Do you think, I mean, I personally think it's a great thing. What drove you to be that way? Being more nurturing towards your daughter.
Yeah, and with your dad, like it's also generational because back
Yes,
then they were raised to think a certain way, and they were
yes,
raised not to show emotions, right? Because if you show emotions as a man, you're soft, right?
yes,
Other names go with that, right?
yes,
And so I believe now we're living in a generation or a time rather where it's okay. We it's the enlightenment age, so to speak.
yes,
It,
yes,
it's okay to show feelings. It's okay to show that humanity side of you and that soft side of you. God has that too, right? The Bible says
yes,
that Jesus was moved by compassion.
yes,
And when I think about that, I think about feelings and emotional being involved with that. And so we're now living in a time where, as a man, it's okay, right, to show that side, right? It's okay to be compassionate and to show that soft side. So um, I believe the difference today, again, with your fathers, going back, it's generational. They weren't taught to show a certain way. They were taught to be stiff necked and to just be a certain way. And if it's not, you're soft and you're this and you're that. So, yeah.
right. And I think, I look at my youngest sister. We don't have the same father, but I observed how he was with my sister her whole life. Very loving, very kind. She could do no wrong. He did. I mean, I saw a difference in the nurturing that my sister received, and I think that
Mhm.
daughters, especially daughters, that is something that they really want from their fathers, and I think sons too. So I think that's something definitely for all of us to think about. If we weren't that way when our children were younger, how about trying now? It may be different, but still, it's never too late. I think parents would be surprised to know how many children are out there still yearning to feel
Mhm.
that from their parents, to
Mhm.
feel that like my parents really love me or they're proud of me. I mean, would you agree with that, Webster?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. The emotional part of it sometimes is missing, and when the emotional part of it in raising a children, you don't have that connection. They're gonna go out there and seek that validation and that emotional connection
Yes.
from unhealthy sources, and that's why you have people, these little girls out there, and even grown women,
Yeah.
um, they're out there and they're getting involved in all kind of things, and they are being driven by their trauma and the lack of
Yes.
love that they didn't get as a child. And they are trying to find that in another man. They're trying to find that in another woman. And it's
Yes.
creating unhealthy cycles, right? And so
Yes.
it's very important that we show that affection and we have that emotional component, and it's expressive, very loudly expressive in our home and raising our children. It's very important that they get that so that they don't go out there and develop unhealthy habits and running around, doing things that will hurt them and cause them to have destructive behavior, right?
Yes, I definitely agree with that. Let's talk about patience. How important is patience?
Um, patience, patience can be defined as the ability to bear challenges and trials calmly and without complaint. And I know, for me personally, having children, you have to be patient.
You
And I
have to be.
struggle with that.
Yes.
Struggle with that, and the children has taught me to slow down, and I'm still slowing down.
Yes.
Because living here in America, it's a fast-paced culture,
Yes.
and it's go 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 go, and so I'm still learning that. Listen, you have to slow down, and the Bible teaches that patience, especially in the family dynamic, it's a supernatural virtue, right?
Yes.
And it's described as the fruit of the spirit that enables us to bear with one another's imperfection in love, right? And it's
Yes.
active, not passive, quality that reflects God's character and
Yes.
from how we respond to difficult family situations or circumstances. So, uh, God is patient towards us, right? There are times that we are entangled in things, and and God is patient and waiting for us to turn to Him. So it's a very important virtue to have, and it also takes discipline to get there as well.
Yes, and I tell you, when you show patience towards someone, you just don't understand what you can do for their self-esteem,
Right.
what you can do for them as a human being. Because if a person is struggling to do something, to learn something, or whatever it is, and they feel that impatience, you
Hmm.
can feel impatience. And it's a very uncomfortable feeling, you know? So let's extend a little grace to each other.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about forgiveness. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, Webster. That is an area in my life where I really, really, really struggled. If you hurt me, I did not know how to let it go. I did not know how to forgive. I think my mother taught me the biggest lesson in forgiveness when my father was dying.
Hmm.
She called me and she said, I don't think your father's doing well, and I want you to give him a call. And I was like, no, why am I calling him? You know, because I was upset with him. And she said, he's a sick old man and he's dying. Like, why would you hold a grudge towards, you know, the way my mom spoke to me, it made me just think about it. And I called him and
Hmm.
I got to speak to my father before he died. And I got to tell him that I loved him. And
Right.
I thank my mother for that gift, because if I hadn't said those words to him and if I hadn't let go of that bitterness, I would have been carrying that around for life. So, my forgiving my father, it set me free. And it taught me a lot of lessons, then learning to let things go. When my son died, I remember tormenting myself. Did he love me? Did I, you know, what could I have done better and all of that? I think if we live in the spirit of forgiveness, it will just set us free from so many things that we deal with in life. What's your take on forgiveness?
Yeah. Beautifully said, Bridget. Forgiveness is crucial rather for maintaining healthy relationships and reflecting on God's own merciful nature, right, and fostering harmony within the family unit, right. If you read Colossians chapter 3, somewhere down there, make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgive you, so you must forgive others. And it takes a lot to go deep down within yourself to give forgive someone who has mentally abused you, physically, emotionally, right, sexually abused you. It takes a lot, right, to forgive and to release that person. But you're releasing it on for yourself and unto God, right? For you to have
Yes,
that peace, right? And
yes,
so it's very important to do an inventory, retrospective check of our hearts, on people who have hurt us, situation that have caused us pain, and to forgive, because when we don't forgive, we're harboring bitterness,
yes,
and we're harboring all kind of things. And so when we release that and cast our anxiety and that burden onto the Lord, it invites the peace, right? And so
yes.
if you hold that and unforgiveness, then you, you're giving yourself a disfavor.
I definitely agree with you. I think a little forgiveness goes a long way. And I think we are setting an example for our children when they see us forgiving. We're
Right,
teaching them also to forgive. If
right,
they see us living in a way where we're very unforgiving, we're teaching them to live the same way. So it's at the end of the day, we need to put our egos aside, especially when we're Christians.
that's right.
And we have that habit, you know, where we see people in church and we don't like them, and it's obvious. It's like children see the hypocrisy of it all. So we really have to stop and think about who's watching us and the example that we're setting. Let's talk about family therapy and counseling if it's necessary. You know I've spoken to a lot of people, they don't believe in therapy. What's your take on that?
I personally believe it's a good thing.
Yes.
Therapist guides family members to express their thoughts and feelings more effectively, leading
Yes.
to better understanding, to reduce misunderstanding. And so I believe that God has give some of these people the ability and the wisdom to navigate difficulty, right? Because
Yes.
sometimes you have in a relationship or a family where you can't speak to one another, right? And you won't get that safe space to express yourself. And
Yes.
so, getting whether I more so prefer a Christian or a therapist with
Yes.
a biblical background, and so getting that, and they are more to apt to listen to the therapist and create that safe space where you can have the hard conversation, right? And a healing can happen in those sessions. Um,
Yes.
you know, attitudes and relationship can be rectified in those sessions. So I absolutely believe in family therapy counseling.
Yes, I mean, I've been seeing a therapist, and I tell you, I'm seeing a therapist, a Christian counselor, Christian therapist, and it's made all the difference. It's been
Mhm,
very healing. I would definitely encourage that.
mhm,
Let's talk about parenting classes if necessary. How do you think for a person that's struggling,
mhm,
I mean, I know it's hard to admit that, what, I'm failing my children. I remember as becoming a parent in my early 20s, and I honestly didn't know the first thing about raising a child.
mhm.
Thank God I was living with my mom at the time, but I had to learn. Sometimes we have to swallow our pride when we don't know. So
Right.
what is your take on parenting classes?
We've never been to parenting class, but I believe getting more educated on how to rear children is a bonus, and especially when you're married, because when children comes along, there's a shift from, as I mentioned before,
Yes.
relationship to child. So if you and your husband or wife are living in chaos before kids, it's not going to be amplified when kids come into the picture. And so getting that education or tactics and how to do parenting in a parenting class, I think that's a bonus, and I don't see an issue with it.
Yes, I like that response. My cousin Lennon is saying we need to forgive ourselves too. And yes, Lennon, that was something that was big for me because for the past parental mistakes that I made, I had to learn to forgive myself in order to move forward. So I definitely agree with that. Let's talk about putting in the work. I think that each family member should put in the work towards the family. It can't be where it's just the mom putting in the work or just the dad or just the kids. I think it when we're in unity, when we come together, I think the family will flourish. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. For my household, my wife and I utilize a shared calendar, and we utilize it a lot, so that we don't bump into each other, right? And so developing a realistic plan that incorporates everyone's work and school schedule to ensure clear communication about availability and household responsibilities it's really good. And again, it's not you've got to put in the work for the family for things to work in harmony. It's not gonna happen just like that. You have to be intentional
Yes.
and you have to communicate, right? And so when you're not communicating, when one spouse don't know what you're doing, and you have all of this going on, and they don't, it creates, that's when the toxicity and the hostility will build up. So it's very important.
Yes.
The communication is clear in what is what, and definitely there's a lot of work that I have to do on that end because sometimes I forget to put things on the calendar. And
Yes.
so, it's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing development. So,
Yes, yes. Let's talk about pride and selfishness. Two things that no family needs, But how do we resolve this issue with pride and selfishness?
yeah, so the Bible characterize characterizes pride and selfishness as destructive forces,
Yes,
poison relationships, and hinder spiritual growth, especially within a dynamic family, right? The root of all toxic behavior is the original sin of Adam and Eve. which began with their selfish pride, selfish,
Yes.
prideful desire to be like God, right? And so this foundational sin introduced selfishness into human nature. And so God wants us to love each other with the same agape love that He
Yes.
modeled for us. And so selfish pride will lead us in the opposite direction. And again, we're living in a country again where it's all about the vanity, right? It's all about the material and who lives in the bigger house and who drives the
Yeah.
most fancier car and those are portals into to having selfishness and pride and it continues to rip many families apart, right? And
Yes.
so the very appearance of you've got to go in for the kill if that starts to raise its ugly head in your union, in your family, in your environment, and it takes the word of God. It takes intentionality. If you got to get counseling, if you got to get people who are living for God to help you to defeat this type of the force, it's do whatever you have to because it's a very destructive thing.
Very destructive. I mean, you have to put the family first. And I think if you still have the old childish ways that you don't want to let go of, don't
Hmm.
get married. At the end of the day, pride and selfishness do not have any place in a marriage. Let's
Absolutely.
talk about leadership and being a role model. If we're the parents, then I believe we have to behave as parents. There are situations where you see where children rule the home. That is very destructive. Your children may be upset with you, but they won't hate you if you've been a loving and nurturing parent.
Hmm.
We have to be okay with being the bad guy sometimes. That's just how it is as a parent. You can't always say yes. If you do, you're setting yourself up for trouble.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's talk about leadership and being a role model.
Yeah, I've seen situations, even in my own family, where I've seen individuals. They're more interesting in wanting to be friends with their children
Big
because
mistake.
they don't that window that was open for them to discipline and teach them the right way has gone. Now these children are in their 20s and they're fighting to be friends because they can no longer enforce the boundaries that they wanted to,
Yes.
when they were
Yes.
younger. And so children, again, learn leadership by observing their parents' behavior in daily life,
Yes.
right? Again, they're watching what you do, not what you say. And so both inside and outside the home, right? It's important to show empathy and compassion. For example, listening keenly. And again, I keep saying this, modeling um, the behavior that you want to see. And so when I think about biblical leadership role models such as Jesus, Christ, Moses, and others, right? That they have a servant type of hood, type of leadership, and Jesus provide the ultimate example of servant leadership and demonstrating how greatness is achieved through serving others rather than seeking power.
Yes. Yes. Let's talk about family meetings. Do you think it's a good idea for families, parents, and children, where they come together maybe once a week or once a month to talk about family life, things, goals that there may be in place for the family, you know, things that are not working for the family? Do you think it's a good idea to come together as a family?
Absolutely, I believe it's very important to keep the unity. I believe, especially living in the world that we're living today, that we are quick to go off in our silos, go off in our different lanes, and we don't check in with one another. And so when
Yes.
we have our family gathering, it brings back things into perspective. I know, when I was much younger, Bridget, and you know this, that, I would pursue family functions. Our dear cousin there, Paula, um, Price was instrumental in keeping family communication
Yes.
going, right? And she will go above and beyond, and she will dig deep, deep in records and trying to connect the dots, and
Yes.
it's very important because that's just how I discovered her, because I was always wanting to bring family together, and even with my own siblings, um, even though I missed it this year, every year I try to put on like a mini reunion, right, where we come together and we meet and we talk, and again, it fosters that unity that is needed. So it's very important as parents, grandparents, and afar off that we come together. It doesn't necessarily have to be once a week, you know, not even once a month, but even around the Thanksgiving holiday, or
Yeah.
2 3 times a year, you come together, and you meet, and you again foster that unity. I believe it's the will of God for us to have that unity.
And I think that's what's missing in today's family life. When
Hmm.
I was growing up, I knew all my cousins, you know, and
Hmm.
it's like I can't say that for my children. You know, it's families are not as connected as they used to be, and I think that's something that's missing, because I can tell you that I think grandparents are important. Uncles and aunts are important. Cousins are very important. I think we all play a role. So that's something that, I'd like everyone to think about coming together as a family. Now, because my last question for you tonight is on spiritual life, but I would like to read Ephesians 6 1 through 4. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. How important is it to have a spiritual life within the family dynamic?
Yeah, great question. Very important. The family unit is God ordained and serves as the foundational building block for both society and the church. And so, with the purpose of nurturing faith and glorifying God, the family is a place where members learn to practice Christian virtues like love, forgiveness, and service through their interaction with one another. And so, husbands are called to love their wives as Christ loved the church, while wives are to respect their husbands, and so forth. It's going a little bit deep. But and children also are instructed to obey their parents, and fathers are to bring their children up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. So, the family is the bedrock. It is God desire intentional to have strong families, right? And we know that the church plays a vital role in our society, and the foundational of churches are built by strong families. So God values strong families, and so when it comes to the spiritual life, He wants that, right? You have the husband who's the head, right, and then the wife, and then the children, and God is the head of the husband, and so I believe that's something that He honors, and He wants to see that. And we're living in a time where, again, there are forces that are trying to cause a lot of distraction and
Yes.
destruction against the family unit, to rip mothers and fathers and husbands and wives apart, and having children to raise in single parents home. And I'm not saying it's evil. I understand things happen. I
Yeah,
do understand life
I
happens,
agree.
but it's God intention for the family to be one, right, and to be a force to be reckoned with.
Yes, yes, definitely. Webster, I truly appreciate this conversation. I hope that you will come back, and I would like to say to the viewers, if you are struggling in any area of family life, pray about it. Seek help, but do something about it. Don't put off today. Don't put off what you can do today for tomorrow, because I'm telling you, time goes by so fast. I was talking to Webster earlier about when he was a single man and now he's the father of two. It's like, where did the time go? But family life is a blessing. And I know that sometimes you know, we may feel burdened by life, our jobs, our financial situations, whatever it is, but God is in control. We just need to turn to Him and trust Him, believe in Him. And I'm telling you, He will be there for you, but you have to do your part. So I would like to wish the viewers a blessed week. And Webster, once again, thank you so much. And I'm serious when I'm asking you to come back.
Of
This
course,
was, I
absolutely.
really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you once again. And for the viewers, thank you for not leaving the podcast after I went off the air temporarily. Thank
So
you, everyone. Have a great week.
thank you.
God
God bless.
bless.